Welcome into Back in the Net. We are back from the international break, which means there's a ton of football going on coming up very soon. We're finishing up some games today. Got some entertaining things coming on throughout the weekend, so let's just get into this full preview. So starting with the Premier League, we get restarted tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. That is 12:30 in England. Wolverhampton Wanderers will be hosting Liverpool. It will be interesting to see how both teams obviously come out of the international break, but Wolves, a team that was struggling going into it, going to be interesting to see if they can bounce back from that. Moving on to the 10 o'clock window, Aston Villa hosts Crystal Palace. Should be an entertaining game between those two. Fulham host Luton Town. It will be interesting to see if Luton Town can get anything going after this international break. Manchester United host Brighton and Hove Albion. Obviously, Brighton, one of the stories of the season so far, and Manchester United also, but for the wrong reasons. It will be interesting to see if both can bounce back from that. If I'm inclined to believe one of them is going to do better than the other, it's going to be Brighton here. Tottenham play host to Sheffield United. Ange Postecoglou and James Maddison won Premier League Manager of the Month and Player of the Month, respectively, for both of them. So it was obviously a good month for Tottenham. It will be interesting to see if that can continue coming out of this international break. Meanwhile, Sheffield United still, they looked like a relegation side coming in. So I'm expecting more of the same from them here. West Ham United host Manchester City, the only team left that has not dropped points in a game so far. Obviously, we are only 4 games into this season, but Manchester City still look quite good. It will be, I'm sure that they can keep that streak going against West Ham, but we'll see if they can. And then in the 12:30 slot for what seems like the third game week in a row, even though we obviously didn't have games last week, Newcastle United host Brentford. Like I said, I feel like Newcastle have been in this game the past 3 match weeks, and they will host a Brentford team that has looked pretty good to start the season. Moving on to Sunday, AFC Bournemouth hosts Chelsea, a Chelsea team that still doesn't look good, still don't know what the plan is under Mauricio Pochettino, what Todd Boehly is building there. So I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Bournemouth pull off a win here. Everton, officially, unofficially, under new ownership, 777 Partners, I believe is the name of it. They have taken ownership of like 91% of the club. It's going to be interesting to see if they can somehow get this team out of the relegation form that they are in. Because if things keep going this way, it's going to end up being a bad season for them. They face off against Arsenal. That's going to be quite a tough test. And then the Monday game, you have Nottingham Forest hosting Burnley. 2 squads that are probably going to be fighting for a mid-table position come later in the season, facing off in this early season battle. So moving on to La Liga, looking at the Saturday matchups, you have Bilbao facing off against Cádiz, Valencia facing off against Atletico Madrid in what should be quite an interesting match because I feel like both teams are somewhat headed in the same direction, but also not because, Valencia still looks like they're struggling once again. Celta Vigo face off against Mallorca. Barcelona face off against Betis in what is probably the match of the week in La Liga. Moving on to Sunday, Getafe face off against Osasuna. Getafe, I don't know what they're doing right now. They just seem like they're in a mess, basically. Hopefully this international break was something that they can, build on here, but I honestly have no idea what they're doing. Villarreal face off against Almeria. Sevilla host off against Las Palmas. And in the other game in contention for game of the week, it is Real Madrid against Real Sociedad. I'm sure Jude Bellingham will have another outstanding game for Los Blancos. And it should be entertaining nonetheless. And then looking at the Monday game, it is Granada against Granola. Two teams that I feel like will be fighting each other for positions coming later in the season. I just don't think they will be right now. Moving on to the Bundesliga. We had a very entertaining game today. It was Bayern Munich facing off against Bayer Leverkusen. A 1-1 game going into the 85th minute. Bayern Munich score in the 86th to make it 2-1. But then a 94th minute penalty give Bayer Leverkusen that equalizer. They go out and score it. We end up with a draw between the top two teams in the league right now. Should be interesting to see how those two teams play out later in the year. I still think this is Bayern Munich's title to lose just because the last 12 have been. Moving on to Saturday, Köln face off against Hoffenheim. That should be quite an entertaining game because I think both sides are evenly matched. Freiburg face off against Dortmund. Another evenly matched game. A lot of evenly matched games here in the Bundesliga this weekend. Mainz face off against Stuttgart. Stuttgart, who have had 5 goals scored in all their games this year, whether it be from them or the opposition side scoring 5 on them. Another thing to watch for there. Maybe one of the only non-evenly matched games this weekend is RB Leipzig hosting Augsburg. I expect Leipzig to run away with this one. Wolfsburg face off against Union Berlin. That's another entertaining game right there. Bochum face off against Eintracht Frankfurt in that final game of the Saturday window. Moving on to Sunday, you have Hoffenheim against Werder Bremen and Darmstadt against Mönchengladbach. Two games that the teams, Darmstadt and Mönchengladbach really aren't even, but both games should be evenly matched, I should say. So then moving on, finally, to Serie. Just a stacked grid of matches this weekend. We have Juventus against Lazio in what should be an entertaining match to start us off this match week 4 of the Serie A season. And then leading into that, the Derby della Madonnina, the Milan derby between Inter Milan and AC Milan, should be outstanding as those seem to be the two competitors for the title this year. Genoa face off against the Scudetto winners from last year, Napoli, in the last game on Saturday. I expect Napoli to run away with that game. But they also lost to Lazio going into the international window, so anything can happen there. Cagliari face off against Udinese on Sunday morning, very early, 6:30 a.m. Then you move on. Framose face off against Sassuolo. AS Monza face off against Lecce. Another very entertaining game here. Fiorentina against Atalanta. And then the final game on Sunday is AS Roma versus Empoli. AS Roma obviously not getting off to the start that they wanted to this season. They're obviously hoping to fix that coming out of this international break. Hopefully they have got things figured out there. And then moving on to Monday, Salernitana face off against Torino. It should be quite an entertaining match. Those are two of the most evenly matched teams in Serie A this season. Then you have Hellas Verona against Bologna to close out match week 4 of the Serie A season. So given that was a very quick rundown of what is going on this weekend all over the continent of Europe. So hopefully you enjoyed this very quick edition of Back in the Net. We will be back on Monday for a full recap. So if you just stumble across this video, hit like, hit subscribe, tell anybody you know about it, and we will be back on Monday for another episode of Back in the Net.